Thank you. Well, this bill, like most that come out here from the Republicans, has a great name. It's a pro-growth budgeting act. It's not a pro-growth budget, big difference, but a pro-growth budgeting act. And like so many of the pieces of legislation that they offer us, the substance of the bill does exactly the opposite of the title. This would better be named the Dig Deeper Now legislation or the Mandate Voodoo Economics legislation. It attempts to enshrine Republican dogma that even an elementary arithmetic student would have some question about. It's based on the theology that the best way to get more is to do less. That if you have less revenue coming in, you somehow will eventually get more revenue coming in. And it just hasn't worked that way. Their approach is much like the alchemist of old, who, when faced with the problem that he could not convert straw into gold, simply responds, "Give me more straw." They can't get enough straw in the form of tax cuts to talk about at their political conventions, but when they apply them, we don't need dynamic scoring to know what the effect is. We have history, and that history is not very favorable to this whole concept that somehow less means more. Putting all of the debate aside, we have the dynamic Bush tax cuts to look at and what their effect has been. And the Congressional Budget Office tells us that the effect has been it cost $1 trillion. $1 trillion toward the budget deficits that we have, and if we extend the Bush tax cuts for those at the very top again, it'll cost another $1 trillion. That's trillion with a T in both cases, and it is a big impact in digging us into the hole that we're in, that we're trying to work our way out of with what should be a pro-growth budget act, a jobs act, instead of something that is a name that bears no resemblance to the substance of the bill. How about the experience with economic growth? What American would not like to have the economic growth of the Clinton years when the tax rates were actually higher than the experience of the Bush years, where the tax rates may have been lower, but so was the economic growth. Almost 4% a year under President Clinton, and down to about 2% under President Bush from 2001 to 2008. Likewise with job growth, dynamic job growth under President Clinton, job losses under President Bush. That's the history, the experience that we have with this theory, this ideology that somehow less revenue means more revenue. Only yesterday in the Budget Committee, we heard the testimony of the Congressional Budget Office, objective testimony, that if we extend, do you have another minute? Do you have another minute?
I yield the gentleman another minute.
Gentleman's recognized for a minute.
We heard objective testimony that if we extend all of the Bush tax cuts for the next decade, we will have less economic growth in this country, not more economic growth, as their theology maintains. And the testimony we're hearing is not limited to Democratic witnesses. Even the Republican witnesses who have come before our committees in the past have conceded that these Bush tax cuts did not pay for themselves. We've seen the result of voodoo economics. We've seen the results of supply side and trickle down. It's time to take a more dynamic approach for the American economy, and that's a jobs bill that will meet the needs of working families across this country instead of playing games with the numbers and trying to show that the impossible is reality. I yield back.